Okay, the first thing you want to do is download a rigged character with a skeleton. I found a rigged character on Mixamo. That's an Adobe site. It's right here. Bring it into the screen. And there's numerous. There's not like, these are not perfect, but they're good enough for our purpose. So when you find your character, for example, this woman, go ahead and download it and place it on FBX for format and T-Pose for pose. Download it. After it's downloaded, go File and navigate to the area where it's downloaded and import it. And there she is. I'm going to pick her skeleton, and move it. Now, while this character has a skeleton, it does not have a control rig. So it's got IF, but not IK, meaning it does not have inverse schematics. You can go and pose this character by pressing on a joint and using the rotate command, for example, and moving the joints as so. But let's make it a little bit more. Let's make it simpler. So we want to add a control rig. To do that, go to Maya workspace and then go to rigging. And in the rigging, I want to bring up this human IK. So I'm not going to show it right now. I'm just going to show you where to get that at. If you go to skeleton and then to human IK, that dialog box will come up. All right. If the character drop down is on any character at all, character 2 or whatever, maybe you've had another character in the scene, go to none and you'll see this list of controls or buttons. What we want to do is create a character definition for this character. So click on the skeleton and then say create character definition. Now click on that character skeleton again here, and then click on this folder right here and make sure this template is on human IK or HIK. You don't want it on these other ones, biped or any other one of those. So make sure it's on HIK and just say OK. And what it's done was it's mapped all of the bones here to this control rig. This is actually a symbol of the control rig. Okay? So now I can now pick I can go over to source here, this drop down menu, and then make sure that it's on control rig. And that'll give me this layout here. In this layout, I can select what joint I want to pick. You can see over on the right hand side on the character how the translator is moving according to the dots or the points that I click on the skeleton here in this interface. But more than that, if I click on that interface, when I move because it's IK, it is actually moving all of the joints. I can actually pull the character in ways that I couldn't pull her before without that IK. For example, I can click this here and then begin to sit her down like this. And you can see how the knees and everything else bend. You can see that this would make it fairly easy to position your character in a car seat, standing up, or whatever you need to do. That's a really simple way of doing this. Now, that doesn't mean that I cannot grab a joint and rotate it, for example. I can still grab a joint and rotate the joint, for example, like this. Doesn't mean I can't do that, but because it's IK, there's a linkage between pulling one joint and it's connecting to another, automatically connecting to another joint. Inverse kinematics. I can pull her foot. You can see how her knee is dropping down. But of course, I'd love to rotate this here and make it kick up on her heel. So really, that's the simple of it. Now, if you want to get this character back to its normal position, you want to just click on drag a dialogue or a selection over all of it, and then press this button here, and that will stand her up back into the position that she normally came with. Another issue is her height. Now, this may not be a 95 percentile woman, so we want to make sure that her height at least is the height of a 95 percentile woman. So click on the root directory for this control rig, and if you navigate over to your channel box here, you can then press on a scale button, that is E, or that's W, that's R, I'm sorry, and you can scale her up to where she needs to be. For example, if this woman were 6 feet, that's about 185 centimeters, and Maya is normally, or its default units is centimeters, you can simply import or start a cube, and this cube is at 6 feet. Now let me tell you how I got that. When I first did it, I went to cube and I went to this option box, and inside the option box, because this is in centimeters, I made a cube whose depth was 185 centimeters by 15 by 15. When I apply, that particular rectangle appears. Now with that rectangle, I can simply position it. I'm going to press D and V and drag this to a corner of that box so it snaps to the vertice. And then with that, I'll press X and I'll slide this up right on that line. So it'll snap right to this line. Pressing X snaps to the grid. And with that, I can now take the root node for this control rig and scale her up so that she meets the top of that. Now, I can also, and this might help you to make sure that she's right there, I can take this face, and duplicate it. So I'm going to press Shift Control and duplicate face. And then I'm going to take that face and slide it over. So I know I can place it and really see where she is relative to the height. Now I can go to the root node, press scale. Now, something to pay attention to. Whatever turns yellow, that is the vector that you're going to control. Now, this is important because sometimes you need to be looking at something else and still controlling that node. So I want to control the main node in terms of the height of this woman, or the overall scale of this woman. So I'm clicking on that and turning it yellow. Now when I'm outside and not seeing that particular scale control, I can press middle mouse button and it still is moving that particular scale control. So now you can see that I'm making sure that she hits right on this 6 foot height mark or plane. With that all done, I'm just going to grab this whole thing, object, grab this one, oh, not that one. I'll grab this and this, and I just want to move this out of the way, all of this out of the way. And then now I can go back and position my woman, and the scale will remain the same no matter what you do. Even when you go back to the stance, it'll still maintain that scale. The scale is 1.064 on this woman to make her 6 feet. That is 6 feet from the ground. She's not really 6 feet because her heel is higher than the ground. You know, she's not sitting flat. But in any case, you get the point. I can now go in, click one of the nodes here on the skeleton or the control rig, and now I can position her wherever I need to position her in order to get my mannequin in the right position. So what's the right position? Well, if you go to a book called H-Point, The Fundamentals of Car Design and Packaging, in the second edition, you'll see a chart on page 127 where it shows the various measurements for a 95 percentile man or woman in seating position. And in this chart is called the approximate reference dimension. You'll see the heel to ground, the chair height, the H-point to ground, back angle, and other variables and other measurements necessary to get that mannequin in the correct position for a particular type of car. In this case, I'd like to do a sports car. And for a sports car, the chair height is 150 centimeters. Or, I'm sorry, 150 centimeters. No, I'm sorry, 150 millimeters. So that's 15 centimeters. So, using the same method that I use to determine the height, I'm going to go and press Shift and then the cube, letting go on the option box, and then I'll set this to 15 by 15 by 15 centimeter cube. Let's apply this. And there that cube is on the ground. Likewise, like I did the cube, I want to position my pivot point right on the lower edge of this cube. So I'll press D to target the pivot point and V to snap to vertices. I'll then click on the middle and just drag it until it snaps down to a vertice at the bottom. Now I want to position this where this particular cube is right on the bottom of the ground plane here. And to do that, I am going to press X to snap to the grid. And so you can see it's snapping to every interval of that grid. And so now it's on the bottom. I'm taking my hand or my finger off of the X, and then I'll just position it somewhere around here. With that, I can now simply grab this here and position this H point until it is right on the top of that cube, because that's the H point means the hip point. So to be more exact, what I want to do is click on this cube, and I'm going to scale the cube up at least horizontally. Move it so that it expands the whole person so it doesn't disappear. And then now I'll press this point again and then make sure that sits right on top of that line. So I know now that this person is, give or take, sitting in the right height, or it's sitting 150 millimeters, 15 centimeters from the floor height of the sports car. Now I can do everything else. I can grab this and move this. I keep her head. Grab this again. I'm going to rotate her. I'm going to make sure that this still is right on the... Now, there's another angle that we could pay attention to, and that is the back angle. The back angle is 28 degrees for a sports car. Now, we can take a plane and then position that 28 degrees and reference that just as we're referencing this chair height. But I'm not going to show you that. That's easy enough to do. But suffice it to say, you can just simply make sure that that angle is 28 degrees. I doubt if that is 28 degrees that we're talking about, but it could be. I'll grab her neck. Oh, not her neck. Her head. I'm just going to position this up a little bit. Maybe use this. Click on this here. Move this a little bit more. And now let's grab her feet. Now you can grab two of them at the same time if you press Shift. And now I didn't click the right one. Got this one, and then this one. Now I'm dragging both of those a little further, and then let's rotate that. We want to make sure that the heel is touching the ground plane. Pressing W, and then bringing it down to her heel is touching. Now there's also an angle for the pedal. But suffice it to say that her heel needs to be on the ground. And now let's just go ahead and position her arms in a position that is natural. So I'm just going to grab this like so. We're just going to move this press rotate. I'm going to move this down somewhat. Etc., 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 right? And we can then now do the opposite arm and hand likewise. So essentially, that's how I would create a mannequin. Now, in order to export this out, what you want to do, let's just go ahead and delete this here. What you want to do is grab all of her items. That's her skeleton, but I'm going to grab all of her items, her hair, everything. And then I am going to duplicate them by pressing Shift D and then Control G to group those duplicates. Those duplicates now are ready to go and be exported. If I grab those duplicates right there, I can now go to File, Export, Selection. I'll go Sitting Woman. And export. Before you export it, however, make sure that you have the proper measurements for her seating position. We know how tall she is in her standing position. She's 6 feet. But I want to make sure, or you want to make sure, how long she is, the tall or the largest measurement as she's sitting. And the largest measurement as she's sitting is probably fore and aft from the back of her head to the tip of her toes. So in order to measure her, I am going to go to the side view and grab a plane from the seat proxy. We're going to shift, right click, and duplicate face. And with that face, I am going to move it, pick the face, move the face, and I want to position that at the back of her head. Right at the back of her head. Oops. So I want to duplicate that again and position one right at the tip of her toes. Somewhere around here. Now we're trying to get, I'm going to scale it a little bit. So I'm going to scale it a lot. So what we're trying to do is measure from here to there, just to get a sense of how long she is, because that's the measurement I'm going to be looking for when I put her in ZBrush. So what I want to do now is take or go to create measuring to distance to, and I must have accidentally again create measuring to distance to, and I can't see that distance to while I'm in that window. So I'm going to press C. So after placing a marker behind her head, a locator behind her head, and also a locator at the tip of her toes, you want to go here to shading and make sure that wireframe on shading is on. This will allow us to see it when we measure it. So I'm going to click here right on this particular one behind her head and grab that, and I want to move this one down because we know where that is. That is actually the distance from the back of her head right there. So now I'll go to create measuring to distance to. With that, we can click right there, press shift and click on near the one near the tip of her toe. Now with that, I'm going to adjust it a little bit more precisely. I'm just going to move this here a little bit right on that and make sure that this is right there too. Just move this somewhere around here. So now we know that that measurement between the tip of her toes and the back of her head is 134 centimeters. Let's keep that in mind when we export her. So again, let's grab her, all of her, Shift D, Control G to put her in a group, and now simply Just move her out of the way from over the original. Now I would go back and just create all the variations that you need, the various heights that you need for each one of your vehicles right here, and keep on exporting them until you have the set that you need. But this is my sports car, at least 95 percentile woman. It's really not 95 percentile woman, but it represents the 95 percentile male. In any case, this is it. And I can now take her, that whole group, export her. And we're going to say sitting woman. Export. Now, over in ZBrush, here's a guy that we've already seated right there. He's not 6 feet, but you know, he's 5 something. In any case, now we can get the woman in here. So what I want to do is go to, in my tool menu, let's go down to import and import. Go to the file that you saved, Sitting Woman, and open. I am going to keep it on import materials as polygroups. And she actually comes in on her own subtool. This is not the same subtool. This is one subtool, which does not include the car. The car is in a different subtool up here. So what we need to do in this particular case, we need to merge all of her together into one subtool. In order to do that, go to Merge. Make sure UV is clicked on. The reason why is because all of the paint here that you see is based on a UV. If you go down to UV map, you'll see, texture. You can see that there's a texture that's mapping over every one of these particular meshes. So we want to keep that together so we can reuse this texture map. So back again in Subtool, make sure that that is clicked UV, so it'll keep the UVs, and then Merge Visible. Come back to your tool list here and find the young lady. She's somewhere. There she is. Now, she does not have that texture, right? And she's a little tessellated. We can always tessellate her by pressing Control D, right, to get the right tessellation. But that's not the issue. What we need to do is get her texture back on and then size her. So go to UV map. Go to texture. Click on that and find the UV, the texture map that was included with her. You should be able to see it after you click on this particular tile in texture map. There she is, and there's her texture right there. I don't know why her hair is so messed up here. But what I'm going to do is undo this and re-import it. Yeah, so I'm not so sure why the UV is messed up like this on her hair. This really shouldn't be this way. That's actually all of their hair has a whole UV remapped on it, which is strange. Again, that's not the biggest issue here. It usually would come in right. But we've got her, and now we need to size her correctly. So we must resize her properly to make sure that she is exactly the scale that we intend. So we know that from the tip of her toes to the back of her head is 134 centimeters. So in order to ensure that, go to your geometry tab and then go to size and make sure this is about 2. This is essentially 2. Then scroll down to your export and place a number in the scale portion that when multiplied by the 2 would equal 134 centimeters. So you want to place in this scale something when multiplied by 2 and the size equals 134. So that is about 67 down here. Now what you need to do is go to Z plugin, go to Scale Master, and let's just slide this over to one of the columns to the left hand corner. Now luckily I've created a menu palette, a custom palette, that when I press Command M, I bring up many of the functions that are located there. But for your convenience, what you need to do now is find the scale of what do these units represent? Are they millimeters? Are they inches or whatever? Because those are really nondescript. That's just a number. So this is going to help us do that in the Scale Master tool. So the first thing you need to do is set the scene scale. So go ahead and press Set Scene Scale. Now you're going to see that number that we saw earlier. We see 134 millimeters. We know, no, that's not it because it was 134 centimeters. So I see one down here where it says 134 centimeters. That is the longest measurement. So I'll click that. And then now the scene scale is set at centimeters. Great, because that's what we need. Once you've done that, again, this is in your own, a separate subtool and a separate tool. So now that you've set the right scale for the mannequin here, you've done that by going to the Scale Master and you've pressed on Set Scene, and then you picked the correct scale in the dialog box. You're ready to go now. So this is its own subtool. It's in its own subtool, and we need to get this inside the subtool that your model, where your model presides. So I am going to navigate to that model. And there it is right here. And this model has already been sized to the correct this model has already been sized to the correct length and height. I know that because if I go here and click on that particular subtool and I click on sliders to subtool size, you can see that the Z measurement, which is the longest measurement in this particular subtool, is 476 centimeters. It's set on centimeters, right? So that is the size of this car, 476 centimeters, which is 4,760 millimeters. So we know that that is the right size. So if we now navigate down and insert this woman, I'm going to try to find her here, right here. She should come in at the right size. So there she is. She's in a subtool now in this, the same tool as your car and also the other mannequin that I set before. I can click on her and just position her where we need to position her. And I'm just kind of positioning her next to the guy to see where we are in terms of relative size. So that's where she is. And I'm going to position her inside of the car. Now, we know that she's the correct size. I'm going to turn on transparency so we can actually see her inside of the car. And we know that if we put her heel on the floor of the car, that is the seat height. But really, is that the real position of where she should be? Well, there's also a floor height that we need to pay attention to. Now, I did not dial that in. I did not make a particular reference cube for that. But let's say that this person sits up about this high. And so the floor of the car is about that high. If the wheel is touching here, she's about that high. Maybe even higher. And she's sitting maybe somewhere around here. So that's the person in the car, and this is how you set it up. Now, in order to get someone on the other side, you know what you can do. You can press Control D or just go to duplicate here. We're going to duplicate her, and we're going to slide her twin over onto the other side. Now we can see here, the problem with this is that when you have it on transparency, you can't see two subtools at the same time like that. So we have an issue. I'm going to turn this one off so we can see her and probably make her right about here. And let's turn this one back on. Or maybe because if I accidentally turned on some other subtools, we just should probably, let's merge down. That's not that important. Here it is, and now it's time to make sure that I can create a tub for her, and then I can begin to create the interior.